to start taking your seats because we're about to start in a couple of minutes. Okay. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you could kindly take your seats, because we will be going live in a couple of minutes and we want everybody to be sitting down when we do. Thank you so much. Okay. Good morning. Take my mask off for a moment. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If the last few guests could take their seats, that would be absolutely terrific. My colleagues at the back will give us a sign when we have gone live and when we're ready to go. Just before we go live, you'll all notice where you're sitting, the distance between the chairs. These are the protocols which we follow here in accordance with EMSA's COVID protocols and the COVID protocols that are applicable here in Portugal. So first of all, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, panelists, colleagues, both here in our premises in EMSA and joining us from around Europe. You're very, very welcome to the first official presentation of the European Maritime Transport Environmental Report, a joint project of the European Maritime Safety Agency and the European Environment Agency. We have a very busy agenda here today. As you'll hear throughout the course of this event, this is the very first report of its kind, and so is this event. Now, for those of you on social media, let me make a shameless plug that our hashtag today is #Emter. So let's see if we can get it trending. But first, ladies and gentlemen, we start our event with a quick video overview of the maritime transport sector picture as it stands today. Across the vast expanses of the world's oceans, thousands of ships pass every day, supporting vital human and economic activity. The maritime sector helps drive our trade. Maritime transport helps us move around the EU. It connects remote islands and communities, and it provides a vital service to our regions and those who live there. But the maritime sector exerts pressure on the environment, including on the air we breathe. Approximately 40% of the EU population lives within 50 kilometers of the sea, so air emissions from ships are a particular concern for coastal communities. Ships emit several substances, including sulfur oxides, nitrogen oxides, and particulate matter, which can affect human health in many different ways. These emissions can be significant in areas of heavy maritime traffic. Underwater, the noise made by ships' propellers can cause hearing damage and behavioral changes in animals, disrupting the marine ecosystem. Marine litter can endanger fish and animals living in the oceans, and it impacts coastal communities when it washes up on shore. Ships unload the waste they generate on board in port reception facilities in the EU, but sometimes some of this waste is discharged at sea before the ship docks at port. These and other environmental challenges are being addressed through legislation, action, and innovation. Across the vast expanses of the world's oceans, thousands of ships pass every day, supporting vital human monitoring. The Monitoring, Reporting and Verification Regulation obliges all ships over 5,000 gross tons calling at EU ports to report their CO2 emissions through the Thetis MRV tool, developed and maintained by EMSA. The EU has led the way in imposing a strict cap on sulfur emissions from ships. At operational level, remotely piloted aircraft system services help national authorities carry out emissions monitoring. The THETIS EU tool also provides near real-time monitoring of sulfur compliance in EU waters. And together, EMSA and the European Environment Agency have cooperated on the European Maritime Transport Environmental Report, the first report of its kind. It gives a complete picture of the impact of maritime transport on the environment in the EU and assesses current and potential future sustainable solutions for the sector. At global level, the International Maritime Organization has, since its foundation, adopted more than 50 international treaties regulating shipping, of which 40% focus on environmental protection. New technologies, innovation, and R&D are key for the maritime industry in attaining greater sustainability. Onshore power supplies provide a clean source of energy in maritime and inland navigation ports, and an increasing number of vessels are equipped to use it. Improved ship design and operation are increasing energy efficiency standards. Most ships built after 2015 already comply with standards applicable between 2020 and 2025. And the rapid pace of technological change is being adopted by the industry to further meet sustainability goals. The ocean is our shared home and heritage, no matter where we live. And as the EU moves towards a carbon-neutral future, the challenge facing policymakers, industry, and citizens alike is clear: to work together to ensure the health of our oceans and seas, for ourselves and for future generations. Gentlemen, was just a very quick video overview of some of the environmental challenges within the maritime sector today. But without further ado, it's time to drill down into the content of the EMTA report. So please allow me to welcome onto the stage the Executive Director of EMSA and our hostess today, Maja Markovčić-Kostelac.
As usual, it doesn't work when it should. Good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my real great pleasure and privilege to welcome you here in EMSA, the European home of maritime affairs. We are sitting here physically, presentially, for the first time after almost 2 years. And that is by itself a happy news. I have a great privilege today to present together with my dear colleague Hans Brunings the first European Maritime Transport Environmental Report, or EMTA, which was jointly developed by our two agencies, EA and EMSA. But at the beginning, I would like to convey my warmest welcome to our distinguished guests and all those who pay part in today's event and who contributed to the development of this report. Starting with His Excellency the President of the Republic of Portugal, Mr. Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, who sent us a dedicated message. I would also like to welcome Commissioner Vălean, who is going to join us later in the afternoon. I would like to thank the Commissioner for her continued support and the participation in this journey. I would also like to thank Commissioner Sinkevičius for his inspirational message that we are going to hear in a couple of minutes. And of course, for the support in preparation of this report. A special note and thanks go to Karima Delli, the Chair of Committee of Transport and Tourism of the European Parliament, whose dedication to maintain maritime sustainability as a priority topic for policymaker in the European Parliament, has been an important inspiration to our effort. And now please allow me to warmly welcome Henrik Holloway, Director General of DG Move. Welcome home, Henrik. Warm welcome goes also to Veronica Malfredi, Director of Quality of Life in DG Environment, who will join us remotely. I cannot stress enough that the important contribution from DG Move and DG Environment were essential in this process. I also want to thank our panelists who are here today, presential, took this long journey to mark this special occasion. Mr. Vasilis Demetriadis, Deputy Minister of Shipping of Cyprus, Nuno Sanchez Lacasta, the President of the Portuguese Environmental Agency, Klaas Berglund, the President of EXA, Hans Prinz, the Chair of Waterborne Technology Platform, and Monica Verbeek, the Executive Director of Seas at Risk. And to all of us, and all of you, who made the journey to our headquarters and joined us physically, but I also want to welcome almost 160 participants who join us remotely today. This report, a first of this kind, was, as you know, jointly developed by EEA and EMSA. Its very existence proves the added value of cooperation at EU institutional level. And on that note, please allow me to extend my sincere thanks to my dear colleague Hans Brunings and his entire team for the dedicated approach to this impressive task. Bonds that we were built during this work will certainly have a positive impact on our future cooperation, which we actually already discussed today. And this is the added value per se. This was a cooperative, inclusive undertaking that brought in not just ourselves, but the wider joint stakeholders community. I should not forget to thank both our teams, EEA team and EMSA team, for the work they have done, for many working hours they have spent, and for the dedicated and highly professional outcome we see in front of us. Next slide, please. Now the report. As you have seen, it presents the factual analysis of the maritime sector in terms of economic and social importance of shipping, but most importantly, in terms of the pressure it exerts to our environment. It contains facts and figures, but also a repository of the EU and international legislative framework and initiatives, both existing and those in pipeline, as well as relevant R&D projects. When developing this report, we have also identified gaps, knowledge gaps, areas where there's a lack of information, which we plan to fill by initiating dedicated research and monitoring projects. This report is important, ladies and gentlemen, because shipping is important and because environment is undoubtedly important. And both are on our agendas now more than ever. Shipping is indispensable for the EU and global economy. It is a silent industry that moves the world. The sheer scale of its reach is well known, but the figures bear repeating on this occasion, and it's worth to repeat it all time again. 90% of the world trade and 77% of the EU international trade is moved by the sea. Within the EU, 35% of intra-European trade, again, served by the maritime transport. Throughout the pandemic, shipping demonstrates once again its resilient nature, keeping vital supply lines open and delivering essential commodities, including food, fuel, and medical supplies. In 2019, the number of ships registered in EU member states reached nearly 18% of the total world fleet, measured by weight tonnage. And in terms of ownership, it accounted for around 36.4%. Of course, in the EU, the maritime sector, including port and shipbuilding industry, has the important social dimension, employing more than 1 million people. And I must underline the importance of the maritime transport for the small island communities, including those in Europe. Like many other human activities, maritime transport, however, undoubtedly exerts pressure and has an impact on our environment. This is clearly reflected in this report. From air emission to oil pollution, from operation to accidental pollution, from plastic and noise pollution to transfer of living organisms via ship ballast water or fouling. Maritime transport affects our ocean, our coastline, our climate, and the earth we breathe. Starting with the air emission. Our TETIS MRV systems show that in 2019, ships of more than 5,000 GT, calling EU and EA ports, emitted 144.6 million tons of CO2, which is approximately the same as the year before, and it represents 18% of the global CO2 emissions from international shipping. In addition, the maritime sector contributed by 13.5% to the global or total EU GHG emissions for transport. In terms of air pollution, which has a special relevance for nearly 40% of the European citizens who live within 50 kilometers from the sea, the proportion of emission produced by the waterborne transport sector represents 24% for SOx and NOx and 9% for particulate matters of the emissions from all economic sectors. Model estimates showed that in 2019, sulfur dioxide emissions from ships calling at EU and EA ports amounted to around 1.63 million tons. This represents approximately 16% of the global SOx emissions from international shipping. Very importantly, we see the sharp decrease in SOx emissions in North and Baltic Sea, which can be directly attributed to the establishment of sulfur control area, SECA, in this area. And in some areas within the SECA, the emission concentrations have dropped by 60%. So we welcome and support the initiative leading to the distinguishing designation of SOx control area in the Mediterranean Sea as well. NOx emission tells a slightly different story. Estimates shows that NOx remains stable in all European seas with a value of around 4.46 million tons in 2019. This represents approximately 22% of the global nitrogen dioxide emissions from the international shipping. The designation of the NOx control area in North and Baltic Sea will have relatively limited effect in next decade, since it applies only to ships built after the 1st of January 2021. Based on the expected growth of the maritime transport sector and the measures already taken in other transport sectors, maritime sea-based source emissions of NOx may exceed land-based emissions by 2030 under business as usual scenario. New technologies and alternative source of power will play an essential role in moving towards greener shipping. In terms of ships themselves, more than 250 ships trading in EU are now equipped with batteries as a power supplement, and just 67 are LNG ready. Ships currently trading in EU that are OPS ready amounts to 223. EU projects have successfully provided the feasibility of methanol as the alternative fuel, and the recent announcement of the order of several new ships built with methanol confirmed the sector is indeed embracing into new technologies. The use of ammonia is also being explored in the new engines, either as a fuel or within the fuel cells, And in addition, green hydrogen is being investigated as a long-term solution to decarbonize the sector. Still, port infrastructure developments relating to alternative source of power and the emission reduction are relatively limited. Only 60 ports in the EU currently have LNG installations, and around 30 have high voltage OPS. Both air emissions, but air emission is only, let's say, one form of impact of shipping to the environment, and it is relatively new on our agenda. We know that Annex 6 of MARPOL was adopted in 1997, while Annex 1 was adopted in 1973. So we are relatively new in the area. And in this area, significant progress has been made. While on one hand, there has been 20% increase in seaborne oil trade between 2010 and 2019, including a considerable increase in the size of ships' bunkers, accidental oil spills in Europe have significantly decreased. Between 2010 and 2019, out of 44 medium-sized oil spills, only 5 were located in Europe. And during the same period, only 3 large oil spills out of totally 18 were located in Europe. In addition, even an increase in the area covered by our service CleanSeaNet, the number of detection of oil spills per square kilometers has decreased, confirming a positive declining trend in discharges. Shipping is known as the vector for the introduction of more than 50% of non-indigenous species, with the largest number found in Mediterranean Sea, which can be transported from one habitat to another by ships either externally via hull coating or through the ship's ballast water. Marine litter remains the issue of growing concern, and while the majority of marine litter originates from the land-based sources, important contributions from activities like shipping, fishing, aquaculture activities, dredging, and offshore mining, sewage, and illegal dumping of sea can be monitored. There are also other emerging areas such as underwater noise. It is estimated that between 2014 and 2019, the total accumulated underwater radiated noise energy more than doubled in EU waters. These later 2 emerging issues are the examples where EMSA can and will support the EU and international communities in building the necessary knowledge and bridging the existing information gaps. Shipping is, ladies and gentlemen, undoubtedly at a crossroads. Today's environmental agenda literally moves shipping into a new era, as revolutionary and innovative as it was to move from sails to steam engine. To reach the EU Green Deal objectives in maritime transport, including carbon neutrality by 2050, as identified in the recently adopted Fit for 52 package and translated, for instance, into the Smart and Sustainable Mobility Strategy, we need a brave and visionary approach. We need transformation based on new knowledge and new technology. It will not go without the challenges and interruption, but it also provides a great opportunity for growth and success. This is a multi-layer process, which needs to have all stakeholders on board. Maritime industry, which is a future-proofed and technologically and ecologically driven, needs a coherent, logical, and robust EU and global legal framework, addressing not just environmental, but also safety, security, and social dimensions. Conceptually, new ships and ports need to be developed based on the high technological and digital solutions. To facilitate that process, adequate programs and financial instruments are important. Let me briefly mention that, new slide please, that Horizon 2020 had approximately 60 maritime and shipping projects in research and innovation, with an approximately value of 400 million euros. But now, the new Horizon Europe program accompanies the new co-program partnership on zero-emission waterborne transport with 3.8 billion euros, with the goal of providing and demonstrating zero-emission solutions for all main shipping types and services before 2030. Acknowledging the importance of the maritime transport sector, its role in transition to green economy, as well as its capacity as a driver of employment and growth, its vital role in connectivity in Europe, its important social role, particularly when it comes to the island communities, we believe maritime transport sector should find its rightful place in the recovery programs being implemented at member states level as well. But shipping is one segment of the wider chain. So all parts of the chain should be included, from public institutions to private sector, from ports to shipbuilding, from shippers to financial sector. And finally, transformation needs to be mirrored by the change in behavior and in mindset of all of us. And I cannot stress this enough, supported by the change in education and training system, capable of forming new generations of maritime professionals with new skills, new ideas, and new outlook. New hardware with the same good old traditional heart of shipping. This is the recipe for success. This is an opportunity and a new wind in the sails of EU shipping in the global arena. I'm looking forward to discuss this further during our afternoon's panel. And now to you, Hans.
Good afternoon, and also welcome on my behalf. I'm Hans Brunings, the director of the European Environment Agency. And Maya already congratulated the teams on both ends for the good collaboration. And what one normally does not do when congratulating teams is to single out a person in those teams. But today I would like to do that, because we would not be standing or sitting here to present this report without the professionalism, the commitment, the enthusiasm, and the personal skills of Irene del Barrio Avarelios. On our side, she was the engine of the report, but Irene passed away last Friday. She would have loved to be here because she was passionate about the environment, passionate about the marine environment, passionate about life, and she was somebody who was looking for solutions and not only describing problems. And I think that is what we are trying to do in this report as well. So this report is also a tribute to Irene. The whole goal of the innovation that we are looking for is to achieve a sustainable model, not only for the maritime sector, but a sustainable model for society. It is, you could say, the boundary condition that we are increasingly recognizing for the economy and for society in the 21st century. This is deeply embedded in the Sustainable Development Goals, but also is the logic of the European Green Deal. And the needle on the compass is clear. We are talking about a climate neutral society and economy, which means net zero emissions. We are talking about a circular economy that keeps resources in the economy and the value of resources represented better in that economy. We talk about the restoration of ecosystems, not just halting the loss, which was the official line of the previous policy. We now talk about restoration, and we also talk about zero pollution. And I think for all sectors, and that also includes, of course, the maritime sector, this means that one has to imagine, be creative, innovate, and find the business models to operate within those boundary conditions of the economy of the 21st century. And the framing that is often given in your neck of the woods, if I might say so, is that of the healthy blue economy. The oceans, the sea, the blue economy is regarded as a part of the solution. We can find our energy there. We can find resources there. They are part of the food system innovation that people talk about, but it's also the place where the maritime sector, of course, operates. And from an environmental and climate perspective, if we talk about a strong blue economy, it is obvious that this is only sustainable if we will have strong blue. And strong blue means healthy ecosystems in our oceans, the oceans playing their role as climate regulators, and healthy use and sustainable use of the resources that are there. If we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, and I could say a lot about them, but let me frame it in the following way. We all know this pin, the circle with the 17 colors of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. It's actually one of the only global policy initiatives that people wear of a variety of backgrounds. NGO people wear it. You see scientists wearing it, business people, government leaders are wearing the same color. So it is a framework that we can use to reflect on these challenges. Also in the maritime sector, you know that Sustainable Development Goal 14 talks about life below the water. And what we did in this graph is we mapped on the X and the Y axis the SDGs against each other. And where you see a lot of orange is where there might be conflicting interests. And if you look at SDG 14, there is a lot of potential conflict there. And with conflict, I don't mean social conflict, but it requires a careful deliberation and vision to make sure that some of the solutions in the sector are not contradicting some of the objectives on climate sustainability in general, and in more particularly also on biodiversity. Now moving to climate change. This is a graph, and without going into any details, that shows the warming of the oceans. And the European seas are warming faster than the oceans globally. This is completely consistent with the fact that the Northern Hemisphere and Europe heat faster than the rest, most of the rest of the world. And this is just one indicator. One indicator. If we look at the physicochemical parameters of the oceans, which we have considered as stable for many years, actually forever almost, if you look at human scale, we are noticing through our types of observations that those physiochemical parameters are no longer stable, and that even some of the large dynamics at oceanic level are being questioned by scientists now in terms of their stability. This is deeply concerning, also because of the regulation in terms of climate that oceans play. They actually absorb most of the planetary warming at this level. So at a systemic level, the quality of the blue that we are counting on, we are facing serious challenges. You have undoubtedly heard of the last IPCC report, very recently published, which talks about urgency and about the absolute need to peak greenhouse gas emissions and to go to net zero emissions. And it is clear that maritime transport is a piece of the puzzle here. And I think Maya's graph showed in more detail what we are talking about. I would like to say that the puzzle consists of logistical chains, of which the maritime sector is, of course, one link. You are transporting goods from A to B, but there is a whole chain before that, a whole chain behind that. There are systems of production and consumption behind that. And so we think at the agency that the challenge is to frame the innovation in the maritime sector in the overall approach towards making our whole mobility system part of a sustainable and climate neutral future. Maya has already shown in greater detail the other impacts beyond greenhouse gas emissions of the maritime sector. So I will not go much deeper into those. I would like to single out two things. One is the non-indigenous species. The estimates are that about 50% of the non-indigenous species, or invasive alien species, as they are sometimes called, come through maritime transport. Yeah, that is a concerning element. The other element I would like to emphasize here, and Maya also mentioned it, is that on most of these elements, we have had legislation and regulation not for 5 years, not for 10 years, but sometimes for 20, 30, 40 or more years. And so the real question in terms of policy implementation becomes, why is there in some domains such poor implementation? And one of the analyses made is that the collaboration between actors, the forward-looking nature, and sometimes the conservatism of some of the actors have played a role on top of the compliance mechanisms that often fall in the hands of countries, and where EMSA, of course, plays a critical role in Europe. Now, moving forward to the innovation and the necessary investments. Yeah? We think it's absolutely clear that what we have been operating under in many industries, and I think including the maritime sector, is that we've invested a lot in making existing systems more efficient. We didn't question the technology, we didn't question the system, we made it more efficient. And any engineer will tell you that marginal efficiency gains by definition are tangential and becoming more and more marginal and difficult within a certain technology. And any economist will tell you that they are increasingly more expensive. Any environmentalist will tell you today that they will not lead to the objectives that we have set for 2050. Now, if you take those three reasonings together, it is clear that what we are looking for is not marginal efficiency gains, but breakthrough innovative investments that open pathways towards 2050 rather than closing them or locking in capital in what will become stranded assets and sometimes also stranded regions and stranded workers. And that can, of course, not be the goal of the innovation in any sector. So imagining the breakthrough technology from a technological point of view, from a business model point of view, but also from a regulatory and facilitating point of view in the public sector, we think is absolutely critical. The European Green Deal is a driver of this type of innovation. Yeah? And we focused a lot on the climate elements in the European Green Deal. But if you think of the biodiversity strategy, the circular economy action plan, zero pollution, it's clear that those all apply and to the maritime sector and that you play a role in it. But I would like to single out the two last lines. The Sustainable European Investment Plan with the taxonomy is driving investments in a particular direction. And I think it's absolutely important that the maritime sector can make that connection to the financial sector in terms of sustainability rather sooner than later. And the last line is the future economy of Europe with an industrial strategy. It can, of course, not be the goal that we in Europe are ahead of the game and thereby chasing away the industry and the innovation that we stand for. To the contrary, it should help us to take the lead in the industry and the economy of the future. I would like to thank you for your attention. I'm looking forward to working with Maya and with a lot of the stakeholders present here in the future to continue this type of work, to create a common understanding of the challenges, the context that we are all facing, regardless our sector, but also the potential for innovation to do what we have promised each other to do, and that is to make the 21st century the best century we ever had. Because if we implement the SDGs and we take the route of the European Green Deal, that's the potential we have in front of us, but it requires collective responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Executive Director. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we are deeply honored to have the privilege of introducing a message from the President of the Republic of Portugal, His Excellency, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa.
I would first like to thank the Executive Director of the European Maritime Safety Agency, dear Mrs. Maya Kostalac, and the Executive Director of the European Environment Agency, Mr. Hans Brunings, for jointly preparing and presenting us the European Maritime Transport Environmental Report. Being the first of its kind, it provides a very significant overview and factual analysis of the environmental impact and pressures exerted by the maritime transport sector in the European Union. The report, that represents in a way an historical moment, and the proposals it contains constitute an important contribution for a broader EU roadmap in terms of compliance with international environmental standards and goals, since it describes current and future actions to reduce impact on environment, but also on the health and well-being of the European citizens. Sustainable solutions and future maritime transport trends that will respond to current environmental challenges must remain a priority. But in parallel, it is crucial to maintain maritime security at the center of our attention, as we must consider it as a very significant test for an effective multilateralism, since we are now facing challenges and threats on the maritime sector which call for a common reinforced cooperation. Hence, I truly believe the European Union must keep looking into the environmental challenge, never forgetting to take into consideration the security dimension. As you know, Portugal recently approved its new national strategy for the sea 2030. Our main purpose is to keep and strengthen a healthy and productive ocean, and to promote a sustainable and blue economy, providing a fair and equitable development of our coastal communities. Our country has kept a long-term commitment to the ocean's diplomacy. Under the Portuguese presidency, our Prime Minister proposed to the European Union the promotion of a 2050 global agenda for the oceans. And we will be hosting the UN Ocean Conference in June 2022 in Lisbon, thus underlining the importance of seas revival as a topic of the utmost urgency. So I would very much like to thank EMSA and EEA once again for presenting us the report and for the promotion of a vital debate on maritime issues. Portugal is strongly devoted, along with its partner, to strengthening maritime security and protecting the ocean as our common and sustainable good. Thank you very much, and congratulations.
Portugal. And now, a message from the European Commissioner for the Environment, Oceans and Fisheries, Virgilius Sinkevicius.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to address you today at this launching event for the European Maritime Transport Environment Report that was jointly prepared by the European Maritime Safety Agency and the European Environment Agency. Our oceans and the blue economy they support are indispensable to achieving the transformation set out in the European Green Deal. There is no green without blue. Renewable marine energy can contribute to decarbonization, whilst green shipping can reduce pollution and help create a circular economy in the same way as aquaculture and fisheries can support more sustainable food systems. And without a healthy marine ecosystem, there cannot be a sustainable blue economy. This is as important for people as it is for the planet. This is why I am proud of the cooperation of EMSA and the EEA in preparing this report. The European Maritime Transport Environmental Report is unique. This is the first time that all European efforts to reduce the impact of shipping on the environment are brought together in one document. By providing an overview of both the pressures on the environment from the maritime sector and the existing framework to address them, it touches upon all aspects of shipping that influence the environment and highlights the challenges and opportunities this sector is facing. This is the reason why we recently set out a detailed and realistic agenda for a sustainable blue economy to play a major role in achieving the European Green Deal's objectives. The oceans can offer solutions to help the EU's transition towards a sustainable carbon-neutral economy. Our ultimate goal should be to have all marine ecosystems healthy, resilient, and able to deliver the ecosystem services on which we so strongly depend. To get there, we should aim at 30% of all marine waters to be governed by protected areas or other conservation measures by 2030, and to have 10% of our sea area strictly protected. Over the past 15 years, the EU has laid a solid foundation for an integrated maritime policy in Europe by involving its member states, regions, local stakeholders, and land-based green economy. The shift to creating a sustainable blue economy will rely on even closer engagement with stakeholders, from businesses, large and small, to local groups, to young people passionate about the health of our ocean and the general public. It must unite all groups and sectors around a common vision. Finally, the blue economy can contribute to carbon neutrality by greening maritime transport and ports. This means that we have to renovate the EU's maritime fleet to improve their energy efficiency and to develop the EU's highly advanced and innovative manufacturing and technological capabilities. While our shipyards develop the technology, our FuelEU maritime initiative will boost the production and uptake of renewable and low-carbon fuels such as hydrogen and hydrogen-based fuels, electricity, and other sustainable energies such as wind propulsion. To conclude, I am confident that this report will contribute to a more integrated approach between the maritime environment and a sustainable blue economy. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Commissioner Sinkevicius. And now we go live to Brussels, to the chair of the Committee on Transport and Tourism of the European Parliament, Ms. Karima Delli. Ms. Delli, good morning. The floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. I'm pleased to be with you today at the launch event of the European Maritime Transport Environmental Report. We are at a crucial timing. The last EPCC report is alarmingly reporting how human activity is changing the climate in unprecedented and sometimes irreversible ways. On the eve of COP26, it is of major importance for the European Union to send a clear signal to curb global warming. While 19% of the goods we consume transit through the EU ports, maritime sector is clearly a forgotten sector in the framework of the Paris agreements. The cost of these goods is, however, not only about customs. Maritime sectors indeed generate about 13% of the overall transport emission across the EU. There are two risks. Since this sector has significant consequences of climate change, as well as heavy fuels have disastrous effects on both our health and environment. And I would like to highlight and welcome to the fact that this report takes both aspects, the impact of environmental, climate change, and health into account. This report gives some worrying figures. Maritime sector represents 24% of NOx and SOx emission in the EU. And the SOx emission mainly coming from the maritime fuels on board of the ships. I am the rapporteur of this report from the European Parliament on the decarbonization of maritime sector that has been adopted before the summer. This report aims at proposing a concrete roadmap to the European Union. We are highlighting various measures such as the implementation of a strategy for zero emission ports. The point is to have zero emission at birth, as well as the setting up of an emission control area in Mediterranean Sea. The studies which is launched today is also outlining the effectiveness of SECA or SECA zone, and we really need to push at the member states and the Council and AMO to set up in the Mediterranean Sea. And I hope I can count on you, the European Commission, for this important task. Today is a time to be ambitious. There is no time left for shine. An effective measure, we need to focus European funding on sustainable solution, maritime transport, such as green hydrogen, ammonia, green electricity, as well as propulsion system. And the European Union can foster a transition based on both ecology and energy, covering the whole life cycle of vessels, from conception to dismantlement. What are we waiting for? I'm really hoping that the new Fit for 55 package will be a basis for that. On that note, I would like to highlight the fact that I am disappointed to see gas, and in particular LNG, mentioned in the report as solution for the transition. We should not go from relying on the fossil fuel to another. LNG infrastructure are very costly, and investing in this gas postpones the conversion to more sustainable energies. Besides, more and more studies are showing the skyrocketing impact of maintained products by ships powered by LNG on global warming. So, will both the health and environmental emergency have been hitting us from months and years, so the EU cannot lose the energy battle. So let's all to be ambitious in order to form a bright future. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Karima Deli, live there from the European Parliament. And now, for the first of our two keynote speeches today, we are delighted to welcome the Director General, DG Move of the European Commission. Onto the stage, Mr. Henrik Hololai, the floor is yours. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, dear Maya. It's great to be here. Thank you also for your kind welcome. I do feel very much at home here, and it's been far too long due to the COVID. It has not been possible to travel, and as you said, that makes us even more appreciative of today's event, that so many of us can be here together in person, which also shows that we are moving forward in fighting the virus, and the level of vaccinations have gone up, which hopefully makes it possible for us to have multiple meetings like we had in the past, and it's always a pleasure to come here. And of course, today the special, I would say, event is for me, is to witness the launch of this first European Maritime Transport Environmental Report. And there has been very interesting interventions already, as well as the findings which we have seen on the screen, and which also vividly demonstrate certainly the impact. But I think that it is also very important that we remain vigilant, and that our action is based on facts, and this is very useful to have these facts. So I can only but agree with the previous speakers that it is an important and also truly comprehensive document. And my high appreciation to the whole team who worked on this, and congratulations to both the European Maritime Safety Agency as well as the European Environmental Agency for producing this useful document, which of course for us can be also part of the tools for policy making, as well as a good reference, as well as a good basis for establishing facts. I think it's already been established that this report gives us a good overview how shipping affects the environment. Not that we didn't know that before, but it's always good to base yourself on something which has been worked on using the science and of course establishing the facts. And as such, it also shows where EU efforts have been effective and where we need to do more. And I think that is also part of the usefulness of this document for the policymakers and for taking the next steps. Through the European Green Deal, the Commission, of course, is also, as you well know, taking bold action against climate change, the ambition to become the carbon neutral continent by 2050. Of course, that means a lot for the transport sector. Transport sector has to reduce its emissions about 90%, and as we also saw from the pie chart, in the transport sector, the road transport, of course, has to do the heavy lifting, but equally maritime and aviation, which both constitute more or less the same share, have to do also their fair share. And of course, we have to further our efforts on sustainability, and that includes equally the maritime sector, the shipping sector. Last December, Commissioner Valean, who will be with us in a moment, presented the strategy for the sustainable and smart mobility, which also provides a path for the future transition of the transport sector. Basically, it is the response to the Green Deal. It is also the roadmap. It is the framework how we are going to tackle the challenge that will be in front of us for the next decade, but more specifically, how it's going to look like in the next 10 years. And of course, we have already started delivering and of course moving onwards in this path. Decarbonizing maritime sector, as you all well know, without any doubt, is a complex challenge. There's nothing easy about that, and we should also not flatter ourselves to think that it is easily achievable. We know that this is a sector where the assets are used for a long time. This is a sector also where you don't have the ready-made solutions that you can just start delivering. But it is also extremely vital sector for our economies, for our people, for our trade. Whatever we do, we have to do with the ambition that is at the same time also proportionate and realistic. To meet this challenge, we must exploit all the instruments that are at our disposal. For this, we need action both on the EU level, but it is also extremely important to make sure that the action is achieved globally. Globally, because maritime sector, shipping sector, is probably the most global economic sector, or at least one of the most global ones. And that's why we need to move. Europe can be the one who is giving the push, but the rest of the world also needs to deliver its part, and especially, of course, in the framework of the International Maritime Organization, where I think many of you would agree that sometimes we would like to see more ambition. That is the lowest common denominator, which sometimes gets us further and not far enough. To deliver our ambitious vision for a sustainable maritime sector requires also a genuine basket of measures, as one can put it. And that means, of course, the different elements which allow us to move ahead in terms of the decarbonization of the sector. The Fit for 55 package adopted in July contains important elements for that purpose. And in particular, and I'm also very proud, and I know Commissioner Vălean is as well, in particular, the proposal on the Fuel EU Maritime Initiative that will specifically address the use of cleaner fuels. But of course, this is just one element in this basket, but it also is a big element in this basket because it's clear that we have to address the supply side, and there are no good solutions in the near future. Innovation, everything is going to take time. This is not happening overnight. It is very important that we would be able to achieve more sustainable maritime fuel is used in the shipping. But again, it has to be done in a realistic way. And I'm very pleased also that the reaction from the industry to our proposal has been cautiously positive. Nobody has said that we have put something on the table which is out of sync, out of reality, not achievable. And I think this is already something which is good to build on. By addressing the demand side, Fuel EU Maritime will complement the proposals for the revised alternative fuels infrastructure regulation and also the renewable energy directive, which should ensure that the provision and distribution of alternative fuels is met by sufficient level of demand. So supply and demand really have to be brought together. There are obligations which come on the industry itself, shipping industry, but at the same time also the fuel itself has to be available. These EU measures complement ongoing efforts at the IMO to act on reducing greenhouse gas emissions from shipping. Following the agreement on short-term measures on carbon intensity standards, IMO will soon start discussions on mid- and long-term measures. And these are, of course, very important discussions. And these discussions also have to provide realistic and positive solutions. And that also would include a possible global market measures and further action to promote the uptake of alternative fuels in maritime. Together with the EU member states, the Commission aims to steer these efforts towards high level of ambition. I think we can all agree with that, and we have always continued to boost for this direction. However, greenhouse gas emissions are not the only way in which shipping affects the environment, and I think that is also something which very clearly and very vividly came out from the report as it was presented earlier. Air, water, and noise pollution are also extremely important factors. With our policies and actions, we aim to tackle all of them. Of course, how else can it be? And for example, the onshore power supply obligation is something which will have also big difference concerning the emission of small NOx and small particles from ships which are calling the ports. Especially, of course, this concerns the cruise ships. And In addition, there are already helpful measures in place like the Port Reception Facilities Directive. Where possible, these measures should eliminate waste discharges from ships and ensure proper waste management in ports. Again, something which I think is a very important step further, and where we really need to achieve good results, and I would say even possibly in the short term. Further efforts are made to reduce maritime pollution from ships, like the update of the rules on ship source pollution. Here, I would like to stress the importance of EMSA's satellite-based surveillance systems, like the Clean Sea Net, which makes it possible also to alert our member states to oil pollution at sea, and, which is also very important, to identify the polluters. Let me also underline that while improving the sustainability of the shipping sector, we continue our key work on maritime safety. That is what EMSA is about. First and foremost, it's about safety. And they are doing a great job there, and they will continue to do the great job. But it is clear that there are other important elements like the sustainability, which EMSA is also playing a bigger role and continues to play a bigger role in the future. In fact, safety and sustainability are also closely related. Higher levels of safety support at the same time greener and cleaner shipping, making sure that accidents that may have catastrophic consequences for the environment do not happen. So by concentrating on the key work, the core tasks related to safety, we are also at the same time contributing to the environmental sustainability. EMSA support is also absolutely vital in making all these efforts a success. At the same time, let me remind you that work across these areas and across agencies will also be essential in achieving these goals. And that's why I am also very pleased here today, because the report is a result of a cross-agency good cooperation and collaboration. That might sound something which is self-evident, but it is not necessarily self-evident. We see that also across many agencies that we have in the EU, and that is very good that in this case, you are showing the way and creating the best practices. So finally, dear Maja, dear Hans, let me once again thank you and congratulate you for the good cooperation, good collaboration, and all the success for the future. Hopefully, we will be able to witness more work together, which is something that would be beneficial for our maritime industry, for the EU, its businesses, and its citizens. Thank you for your kind attention. Good luck.
Mr. Hololai, thank you very much. We return now to Brussels for our second intervention, given today by Veronica Manfredi, Director, Quality of Life at DG Environment.
Dear Maja, excellencies from all the member states present in the room and also following us remotely, dear EU commissioners and MEPs, dear Hans and commission colleagues, dear Henrik, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thanks a lot for organizing this launch event and for inviting DG Environment to celebrate this first ever EU environmental report for the maritime sector. Our Director General, Mrs. Florica Finkoya, would have very much liked to be here with us, with all of you today, but unfortunately she could not due to other commitments. And I must also, due to other problems, follow only remotely. She has asked me, however, to pass you her very warmest regards. I'm really honored, actually, to share with Mr. Hololai, the Director General of DG Move, the pleasure and duty to introduce now today's panel debate on a green agenda for shipping. But again, I know everyone has done it. I attach myself to the choir of congratulations to the teams in EMSA and EEA, which have produced this remarkable report, but I really need to do so and congratulate them warmly. And allow me also to express my deepest condolences for the sudden death of the colleague Del Barrio, which I was totally unaware and which I really, really resent. really sincere sympathy also to her family. This report has really brought together for the very first time data and analysis that come from different sources. So I think it's fair to say that it's due to become the reference document on the sustainability of the sector for the general public. It's the very first time that our European centers of excellence in this area, the EEA and the EMSA, by working together, show so clearly, so openly the added value of this knowledge sharing. And indeed, very much like Mr. Ololai, we all hope and believe it's only the beginning of a fantastic adventure together. We particularly welcome, as DG Environment, the holistic perspective that this report takes. It is indeed crucial at a time of urgency, for the reasons that we know, to exploit at best the synergies across policies. And this report highlights indeed both the challenges and the opportunities which the shipping sector faces. Its robust evidence allows to assess the progress made and identify the key areas for improvement. Also, we welcome the fact that there is a clear use by the agencies of consistently higher and more innovative sources of data. In particular, we welcome the fact that there is a broad use in the report of Earth observation data from Copernicus, as well as other innovative solutions. This is key. I mean, engaging into this journey also on innovative solution for data monitoring is, in our view, really key to also fill the knowledge gaps which have been identified by the report. As we implement the European Green Deal, we really think that these reports boost the ambition level of ongoing EU initiatives, many of which have just been mentioned by Director General Ololai, and shows also that these efforts are all complemented by initiatives which are already taking place at the level of individual member states or at the level of individual industry initiatives. Now, on top of the pathway to sustainability, which has been so well designed by the Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy, we have now in Fit for 55 really the package that is going to tackle the challenge of cutting greenhouse gas emissions. But I would like also to stress from our perspective how much European Union sees that the path towards a 2050 climate neutrality must also be a path towards addressing at the same time the health impacts from shipping, notably from air and noise pollution, as well to some extent water pollution. We have repeatedly highlighted the importance to tackle impacts on our fragile marine ecosystem, for example, through oil spillage, water pollution, and underwater noise. And we see in this report how much this is all indeed caused still by the sector, although we have also witnessed in some areas good improvements. In May this year, the Commission has adopted a Zero Pollution Action Plan. Its stated goal is to reduce pollution by 2050, same year of our goal towards climate neutrality, to levels which are no longer harmful neither to human health nor to the environment, which means to levels which our planet can cope with. The action plan outlines more than 30 concrete actions that mainstream pollution prevention in all relevant EU policies and will be progressively rolled out up until 2024. Then we will take stock of the degree of implementation of this action plan, adjust its level of ambition, and move further forward. In this context, research and innovation will be key. And with Horizon Europe, the Commission will further invest in clean and green solutions. Out of the 5 Horizon missions, let me highlight in particular the importance of the one on healthy oceans, seas, coastal and inland waters, on whose exact content the College will decide in September. You understand how timely, therefore, the findings of this report are also from our perspective. It is also a very crucial moment for us because we are in the process of reviewing the overall functioning of the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, a piece of law which many envy to us across the globe, as it is extremely comprehensive. Yet we are convinced that there are ways to make it work in a more effective manner. Please participate in the ongoing public consultation open until the 21st of October this year. We want to tackle all pressure affecting the healthy status of our seas and oceans in a truly holistic manner. In the Zero Pollution Action Plan, we have given to ourselves a number of ambitious goals to be achieved by 2030. Let me highlight those aimed to cut by 55% the health impacts and by 25% the EU ecosystems area harmed by air pollution, including in coastal areas where, as we heard from Maya, no less than 40% of our citizens actually live. These goals are intrinsically linked to those set in the biodiversity strategy, aiming at improving the overall quality of protection afforded to an increased number of marine protected areas. The economic case for acting on pollution is clear. Just as an example, be aware that today, every year in the EU, we face costs for due to the impacts of air pollution, which are 5 to 10 times higher than those that we would face if we would really invest into cleaner air. So in this context, we pay particular attention indeed to learn all the lessons to be learned from the successful stories of the emission control areas, to which Maya was also alluding in her introductory remarks. And I'm happy to hear from the chair of the TRAN committee, the passion and engagement to have soon an emission control area for the Mediterranean too. This December in Antalya, we will have the 22nd Convention of the Parties of the Barcelona Convention. As European Commission, we hope and trust to see a united EU front, bringing on board all bordering countries and enabling us to submit a joint proposal to the IMO to create indeed an emission control area for the Mare Nostrum as well. Again, let me stress how much we see maritime transport as a key component of the recovery efforts, which must drive it towards a greener future. Now is the time to change. Now is the time to navigate towards sustainability, being stronger, and thanks to the facts and figures of this new report, also clearer about where we have to go. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Manfredi, and now comes the point where we bring back the executive directors of EMSA and the EEA onto the stage, and we welcome our distinguished panel speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, if you can take your seats, and we'll start our panel discussion.
Good afternoon again. These were very inspirational words from our keynote speakers, and I thank both Hendrik and Veronica for not just setting the scene, but also for giving us a really basis for a discussion. We managed together today here in Lisbon, as I have already mentioned during my introduction speech, really prominent representatives of the entire sector. So I would start with Mr. Vasilis Demidriatis, Shipping Deputy Minister of Cyprus, who will, of course, contribute from the view of the maritime administrations. We have here also Nuno Sanchez Lacosta, the president of the Portuguese Environmental Agency, who will speak from the point of view of the environmental administrations, national administrations. Klaas Berglund, the president of the EXA, speaking for the ship owners. Henk Prince, the chair of the Waterborne Technology Platform, who will give us the inside view from the technological development perspective and shipbuilding, I believe. And Monica Verbeck, executive director of the Sea at Risk, for a viewpoint of the NGOs and I would say a wider social civil society. Henk, let's start the debate.
Still struggling with the mask after 18 months. That should not be the case. Okay, well, indeed, with this panel, I think we've got the problems, the solutions, the analysis that was made in the report, and I think it's now time to discuss the way forward. And I think if you look at a lot of the mentioning in the report, it's clear that we are banking on innovation and initiatives that combine public and private players. So I would like to start with the one representing in Cypress the sector and say, if you look at the initiatives over the last 5 years, and you look at the policy framing, low carbon, biodiversity, circular economy, to what extent do you think that that type of initiatives in the maritime sector are pushing enough and are in line with these overall objectives? And where do you see from your perspective the sort of issues that we still need to address to be up to speed with the challenges that are out there?
Thank you. Well, first of all, allow me to congratulate both agencies for today's opportunity for launching this first European Maritime Transport Environmental Report. We often say more and more that blue is the new green, and I believe that if, as regulators and industry, we use more wisely the input on this report, we will be able to turn this motto into more concrete actions for the future. So indeed, it's a good basis, and congratulations to EMSA and to the European Environment Agency. So turning to your question, there is a clear higher level of ambition in the last couple of years by the EU to ensure that the sector is clean and green. And of course, for us, it's not a matter of the level of ambition in between, let's say, the international bodies or the European Union. For us, it's all about being more constructive, being ready to work towards the greening of the sector. And of course, what we are trying to produce in the European Union, it could form the basis towards turning to and promoting global solutions. Henrik very rightly mentioned in his intervention that shipping is global. So what we should do is to produce legislative initiatives that they serve the objective, but at the same time, because there is a thin line between being inviting and non-confrontational or becoming isolated within the global framework. So we have to produce results that are scalable and adjustable at global level. So we are ready to work constructively. I mean, it's not a matter of IMO being less ambitious. Don't forget, it's a different organization involving 174 states. We have to lead by example, but at the same time, we should be ready to listen to identify the needs of other regions and to provide assistance in order what we are delivering, it could form the basis to be a global solution in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Vasilis. I just forgot to mention one thing. By the end of our discussion, we will try to take some questions from the podium, and also all of you who are following us remotely in chat You can pose the questions, and as time will allow us, we will take it. But now I will turn to the industry side. We have heard from the member state that we should be ambitious, but also open for the discussion. We have also heard from Veronica that now it's the time for change. Is shipping industry ready? Is shipping industry truly on board? Or you're still struggling with, let's say, daily operations or daily positions yourself on the very challenging market?
Thank you, Maya. Thank you for that question. And so I would like to congratulate you to the report. From the ship owner perspective, we of course welcome data. Data is important, and I think it's always good that we have the same platform, we look at the same figures while going forward. Beliefs and assumptions are sometimes helpful, but facts are much better. So, of course, the industry is on board. There is not a ship owner in Europe that is not thinking about these issues every day. And I think that the big challenge is, of course, we have the daily work. We need to serve the community as we do today with all the shipments. And we see the data, how many ships actually are calling our ports on every day. We need to make that happen every day. But we also need to look at the future and how to do this in a more sustainable way. But clearly, we are also learning. I mean, we as ship owners are learning as well as everyone else of how the effect that shipping has on the environment. And we need to improve, obviously. I would also like to mention that the pressure is high on us also from many of our clients today, and also from the finance side. So the pressure is not only from the regulatory side, it's also come from other stakeholders, which is important. Of course, IMO is the preferred body for us for all regulations, but we also acknowledge that sometimes there is a reason to do regional legislation and regional regulations. And then for us, it's of course extremely important that they are applied to all vessels, regardless of flags, and that we are keeping the level playing field so safe for all the actors. So that is extremely important for us. We are dependent on a good regulatory framework that is effective, efficient, and of course has a long-term perspective. And now when we see all these initiatives in Fit for 55 and the taxonomy, etc., we are a bit concerned of some of the elements in all these suggestions. I think we can all agree on the targets and the goals where we're going, but I think there is room and we need to have a closer discussion together to find more, in some parts, better solutions than the proposals that there are today, without going into too much details. But we welcome a closer dialogue with the Commission on this and also other authorities. I think that is extremely important for us. So yes, we are on board. Thank you for the report. It's very important. And please, all the ship owners, I can assure you, are thinking about this and trying to plan for the future, because we want to be around tomorrow as well.
Thanks, Carl. Back to you.
Yes, thank you. Also on board, of course, for many decades has been civil society in this debate, and especially on the side of observing the state of the oceans, biodiversity, and the concerns that are also voiced by citizens. So, Monica, I would like to turn to you. You are the director of Seas at Risk. You are listening to the analysis, you're listening to part of the solution. We're on board, we are innovating. What is your perspective on, are we going fast enough in the right direction? How with the ambition level, where are we at this moment when you look at the state of the seas in Europe and beyond Europe?
Well, thank you. And congratulations on the report. Well, on the state of European seas, I think you know the answer better than anybody here, because the EEA has published marine messages to report showing clearly the state of EU seas is bad, horrible. It is really going down. In terms of biodiversity, in terms of acidification, etc., etc. Won't go into all the details, but I could recommend all of you have a look at the Marine Messages 2 report to understand a bit of the health of European seas currently. Shipping, plays its role. The report makes it very clear. In fact, I read the report as a sort of a call to action, because it's clear that the shipping industry has a huge environmental footprint that needs to be addressed, has not been addressed sufficiently so far. IMO comes up with regulations, but as the Commissioner already mentioned, has a low common denominator, low ambition. For example, recent regulations calling for 1.5% reduction of carbon intensity annually for ships in order to address CO2 emissions is not at all in line with the Paris Agreement and the 1.5 degree. To achieve that, you have to have at least a 7% reduction of carbon intensity annually for ships. And why not would EU take the lead and require for all ships coming to their ports to have this 7% reduction? It has been done before on double hulls. Why not on this carbon intensity, for example? And another thing I note, it really strikes me, is we are all the time talking about the big increase in shipping that we will see in the coming decades. Now, the EA always talks about systemic change, which is needed to address the current crisis we are in, the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis. And it also says that innovation and technology will only bring us so far, but is not the entire solution, will not be the entire solution. So even if we can make big strides in technology to reduce environmental impact of shipping, as long as the sector is growing and growing, the impacts will continue to grow. So basically what I'm calling for is let's have a look at the way the society is organized, at the economy we now have that's fully based on growth. But EA already says we need to look beyond growth. We have a society where consumption patterns really need to be changed. And we know that if we want to address the goals that we have set in the EU Green Deal. So if we need a reduction in consumption, then surely we do not need growth in shipping. And I think it is a wider issue. It doesn't only concern, of course, the shipping sector. It has to do with production and demand, but it is an issue that needs to be addressed in order to bring shipping in line of reacting to the crisis we are seeing at the moment.
Okay, thank you for referring to the more systemic questions in which this debate takes place and which are deeply embedded, I think, in the logic also of transitions, sustainability transitions of the European Green Deal. Maya, over to you again.
Thanks. Yes, growth, if sustainable, is a positive. And it will be interesting to see, we are always trying to underline that targets of 2030 and 2050 are actually the competitive advantage for the European industries. So it will be interesting to hear, knowing that 2030 and 2050 in shipping is tomorrow morning, how does it look like, let's say, in the real R&D and shipbuilding sector? Hank, are you busy?
Well, the short answer is yes, we're very busy. But the long answer. Let me first introduce the organization I represent. Waterborne Technology Platform is an association of all kinds of stakeholders coming together to set a long-term research agenda for Europe. So we bring together academia and research, but also shipyards, equipment suppliers, ship. We do that for maritime transport and land transport, which have their own special needs. And based on this research agenda, we just entered into a partnership. You mentioned it in your intervention, the Zero Emission Transport Partnership that we set up, DG RTD, but together with DG Move, DG N, DG Climate. So we work with a lot of DGs on this. So there's a lot of focus now on greening, investing, research on greening of shipping. And yes, there's a lot happening. Especially since the last few years, that we see that now the equipment manufacturers invest heavily in alternative engine fuel cells, This is not something you just take shelf. The long-term investment also from these companies. And what they need is the perspective long-term market. We come to the same opinion that Klaas had. We need long-term measures that know that it will be a market in 10, 15, 20 years time for your equipment, because we're talking about very large investment from companies. So yes, they are investing a lot at the moment. You see ammonia engines, methanol engines, hydrogen engines, even not. Of course, you have hydrogen fuel cells, engines being developed. Wind propulsion was mentioned earlier today. A lot of development going on. You see many different systems developed. So you see a lot of things going on, but what we still fear, there's a lot of money now available also for research and innovation, thanks to the mission. But what we fear is the implementation side. So once the technology, who will be the first to adapt it? Because when you adapt new technology, you go for new engine or new fuel, you probably will penalize for be first by higher costs. So who is going to be the first mover? Are we going to be in a deadlock in 5 or 10 years time? So again, this long-term perspective with taxonomy, that we know there will be a market, that there's a financial incentive to go for green technologies, also need equipment manufacturers. The second point I want to make is there's a lot of, we hear a lot about fuels. People say, we go to ammonia, methanol, hydrogen, what have you. And we look at the engines, etc. What is very important in our sector also is to safely integrate into a vessel. We have a lot of experience to do that with current equipment, but if you have all kinds of new equipment on board, you don't want to imagine a battery fire next to it. So there are situations that you want to. We have zero experience at the moment with these kind of systems. So we also need regulations, past societies, regulations by authorities. What we don't want to have solutions that in 5 or 10 years' time are not allowed anymore by regulation. So we are in uncharted waters. We have to do this together. But also regulatory bodies to set a long-term path.
Thanks.
Okay, well, Nuno, the Portuguese presidency landed the climate law. Very ambitious, the most ambitious climate package of any region on the planet. I know that you played a significant role in framing the whole package. It's now out there. How do you, as a regulator in Portugal, look at the maritime sector and its connections to these long-term climate ambitions? What are the challenges that you see as a regulator towards the maritime sector, knowing very well that you are somebody who has been striving for very high and science-based climate ambitions?
Well, you're also responsible, and many others, for that groundbreaking landmark climate law, which we now have in Europe. And I think this is something which we all work, because if the lobbies that are around wanted to stop it, it wouldn't happen. So this is a tribute to European public regulators and different interest groups that we managed to really break through with the European climate law, which, of course, has ambitious targets. And in turn, they need to be, I'm going to use a wine expression, decanted into different sectors. So in that sense, I would say 3 things regarding the maritime sector. First and foremost is that, and frankly, this is a bit of a frustration note. Somebody that's been working on climate policy for God knows how long. It's been a sector that did everything it could for many, many years to basically be out of serious discussions. In fact, there were 2 sectors, as we all recall, aviation and maritime. At some point in time, the maritime sector very smartly said, we will take this up at the IMO, and we will start addressing. And what was done, somewhat shyly, was we'll start talking about monitoring emissions. Now, for all of us dealing with public policy, this is classic. So first and foremost, you say, I'm going to be monitoring emissions. Now, that was, however, I think important, because we now have a wealth of information that we did not have 10, 15 years ago, and most probably you would not have able to use a report such as this one, which is, must congratulate you for, we need to congratulate anyone that does a joint thing, because nowadays it's always very hard to get people to talk to another. So kudos on that, but monitoring. Now, frankly, we now have on the table the key policy measure to regulate carbon emissions from the maritime sector within Europe. And that's to introduce maritime sector to the emissions trading scheme. You know, that's the 55 process. There will be long discussions on this. Lobbies will wake up. But I think the bottom line discussion we need to have within Europe is whether we can afford, and we can use this word in whatever context, whether we can afford, because technically it can be done. Let's make no mistake. Whether we can afford to put the sector within the emissions scheme, whilst at the same time, of course, realize we need to account for the competitiveness of European industry, for the growth of this sector, which, as we know, will be almost exponentially going forward. And in that context, I would argue that we need to have the inclusion, the eventual inclusion of this sector emissions trading scheme as part of a broader policy and, in fact, geopolitical discussion in terms of how Europe protects itself in terms of emissions trading policy with other markets vis-a-vis other trading partners. If we do that, I think we'll have a chance of having a coherent policy measure. Very quickly, another, which is more sort of grand. What we're doing in most member states is looking at sulfur emissions. Everybody more or less has, as you know, nowadays, more stringent standards of ships on the exclusive territorial and exclusive areas, which is in Portugal reduced from 3.5 to 0.5, and when ships dock, it's 0.10%. We have a big challenge with regard to cruise ships because we need to make sure that they dock, it's fully. And again, everybody's trying to do their best. In this country, we're not quite there yet. We're doing some studies in main ports. As this industry recovers from this terrible recession. Finally, I want to, I know Ronaldo just I'll use the word, I want to bring some of these notions home in the following sense. For instance, in Portugal, public is not that there's something called marine prairies. These are not exactly coral reefs, given our latitude, but these are essentially underground forests. Now, most of the people don't see them, so they don't. Certainly the shipping industry, frankly, doesn't care much. We need to start caring about these, because these are absolutely essential to preventing and protecting us from sea level rising. But if not from sea level rising, the worst scenarios come through, certainly from storms and surges which will have on our coastline. So I would like to call attention to that, because it's briefly mentioned in your report, this dimension, also associated with noise. I think we need to do a lot in this.
Thanks. This was a very interesting intervention, which mentioned, I think once again, I would say, introversy and conservative face of shipping. It also put the context of wider geopolitical discussions, which is connected with greening of, let's say, European shipping in the context of global world and market. Vasilis, your experience with changing this attitude and changing this image of shipping?
Well, many thanks, Maya. First of all, allow me to tell you that I do agree that we need a basket of measures. Basically, it's not about forcing the industry to pay, but to make the industry change, embrace change. In that respect, in Cyprus, what we are currently doing, we have launched series of green tax incentives, just to reward the operators that they meaningfully reduce greenhouse gas emissions beyond the global commitments, and to incentivize them to use alternative fuels. This is one. But as you very rightly mentioned, the sector is quite introvert. So what we are doing, and early next month, we are planning to launch a strategic vision for Cyprus shipping under title Sea Change 2030, where S stands for sustainability, E for extrovert, and A for adaptability, because our vision is to make the sector more sustainable, more extroverted, and more adaptable. And it will be a series of concrete sustainable actions, specific time frame. And just to mention something related to the greening, we are planning to introduce a research and innovation shipping environment where we are going to support and fund any mature research projects by the shipping industry. This is one thing to help them to embrace change in their daily practices. This is one. The second thing that I would like to mention, and I believe this is very important, it's about how we should try to together to work collectively in order to deliver the right message globally and also regionally. We mentioned about the MedSega, and we are about to work constructively to submit a concrete proposal for the MedSega as a whole towards the end of this year. And I would also like to mention ship recycling. This is of extreme importance, and we do see the right way forward if we are to ratify the convention, and we are ready to do that in Cyprus. So we are working towards producing and injecting our policies with more green approaches, and we are ready, of course, to work constructively in order to formulate the right legislative initiatives in Europe. Will be inviting, non-confrontational for the rest of
Thanks, and I guess we can help by the capacity building and sharing the knowledge.
that. What the rest of the world might need is to prove that we are ready to help them. And of course, capacity building and providing assistance is of extreme importance, and I do believe that EMSA is best placed to provide.
Okay, a more generic question where maybe different people can jump in. This is a story from, I grew up in Antwerp, next to the seaport, where my father worked almost his whole life. So I was involved in a discussion with some of the senior people of the seaport, asking the following question. If we are going to become a zero carbon or carbon neutral society, and with circular economy where resources are not moved around the planet in the same way, what is the business model for the future? Because most ports depend on three essential elements: moving bulk goods, resources, natural resources, fossil fuels, and containers. If two of the three are fundamentally changing, what is the business model? How do you look in the long term at this evolution? And how will the sector respond to that sort of development? I think it's one of the critical elements, and clearly, Klaas, I triggered something because
Yes,
you were having
thank you for that question.
Yeah.
I think a fully circular economy does not rule out overseas transport. I mean, on the contrary, I think that would be an essential part of a circular economy. For sure, the transport of fossil resources does not have a long-term future. That is very obvious for everybody in the business. Just we all understand that. I guess what we need to understand better is the time frame for it. How fast, for how long is society going to require fossil energy that we provide as an industry? And that is, I think, what everybody thinks about. But for sure, there will be other things that need to be transported on the sea, and the sea is the most efficient way of transporting things. So whatever comes, we will fix it. We are now looking at new types of tankers that transport, for example, capture the CO2 that could be stored somewhere, maybe transport of hydrogen. Hydrogen tankers in the future might be something, etc., etc. So there will always be new opportunities. We are not worried about that.
Okay, I saw Monica also grabbing the microphone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understood we could jump in. I would really like to jump in on this one. Because of course, with a full decarbonization, it's also very clear this happens. We need to pick our emissions now and not in 20 or whatever, how many years we are ready for alternative fuels. So the very first step we need to do now already, but we'll have to be part of a future strategy as well, reduce speed. Very simple, we can do it overnight. It will not only reduce greenhouse gas emissions, it will also reduce underwater noise a lot. It will reduce air pollution, it will reduce whale strikes, all sorts of benefits. And that's something we can do overnight and really get those emissions down. To have that sustainably longer down, of course, in the future, there will be alternative fuels, but it takes still a while to get there. In the meanwhile, we can also look further at wind propulsion, which should be a very important factor also because e-fuels will require an awful lot of renewable energy, much more than we currently have available. And even though we have in Europe foreseen a strategy that foresees an expansion of 25-fold wind farms, offshore wind farms, that still will not be sufficient to get all the e-fuels, to get all our transport going. So you should look at each mode of transport, what is the greenest way? And yeah, you can't put a sail on a bus, you can't put a sail on a truck, but you can put a sail on a ship. So wind propulsion is by far the most logical, should play a big part in the future of shipping, simply because we will not have enough renewable energy to fuel everything. And it will be a very expensive fuel as well.
Nuno, and then over to you again, Maya.
Sorry. 10 seconds.
Firstly, Nuno, then
Sorry, 10 seconds. I'm no expert, but I would say that I don't forecast, given the number of people around the world and the number that's likely to increase, given that the level of world trade, although it has somewhat, in some aspects, not grown as fast as it was expected around 20 years ago, as a result of some trade tension we saw before the pandemic. Nonetheless, on the longer term, trade will increase dramatically. Goods, services trade as such, and as a result, see maritime shipping. So, be that the given, and so we need to focus on technology, on regulatory measures, and on global approaches. I know that's the toughest part because we're not seeing the world really, other than at spasms such as COVID crisis, pandemics. You don't see a world where people really sit down and come together, especially on climate change, where we now have regulatory framework whereby there is some pressure to, as a result of IPCC reports, for people to open their eyes and see this is serious. The way we've set up the system, by necessity, is everybody puts on the table. And what we've seen consistently is people only put on the table what they feel they should offer, we will fall short. So this is the policy gap that we need to really think for the next few years. And I go back to my earlier, can Europe afford to have a regulatory system, technological base, economic base, whereby it can lead by example and still sustain a strong and robust maritime industry? If it cannot, don't blame it, because I'm sure it's another reason. If it can, make sure that at the tip or the crest of the wave, whatever you call it, because otherwise you risk either way being left behind by the big guns out there trying to the others, which will take up the market anyway. That's my warning. So,
well, I would not give the crystal ball to anybody, but I think we should say certainly, with great certainty, that yes, we can transform any of our European industry because there is a strong basis. into the different but still competitive or even more competitive industry. But, and that will be my last, whenever we discuss the issue of transformation, green, digital transformation of maritime sector, somehow there's one industry missing. And we all know this will not go without costs. Where are the financial institutions? Are they on board? Are the particularly private banking, traditionally following shipping, on board? Are they aware? Are they willing to share the risks? What do you think?
Yeah, can I start? I can just say from own experience that the last maybe 12 or 18 months or so, the banks have started to become extremely active on ESG issues, at least for the maritime industry, which I know the best. So the pressure there is very strong. It started with the Poseidon Principles, but then it has moved on also to other issues. So for sure, the financial institutions are very interested of what they are financing today. And I think we should welcome that pressure because that gives us a reason, yet another reason to improve our performance when it comes to all the ESG issues, I should say. It's not only environment. So we welcome that for sure. And while I have the word, I would just also like to comment, right? I think you're absolutely right that the European maritime industry, the edge and the knowledge that we have, we should of course be the world leader in greening our industry. That is a big opportunity for our industry as a whole, and we should embrace that. I think that's the big advantage that we have, because all the maritime innovations, more or less, are actually made here in Europe, and we should continue to have that position. It's very important.
Maya, I suggest that we turn to the floor and to the online audience. So if
Yes,
that is
absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. I will ask for the assistance of my colleagues, and anybody in-house can raise the hand. I just want to add one sentence. Being in the Maritime Safety House, Maritime Safety Agency, the other side of the coin, which we didn't tackle much today, is the safety and security when we talk about the environmental and digital transformation. But I think we all keep that in mind. So, any questions from the floor? Yes, the gentleman.
Thank you very much, Ricardo Batista EMSA, working on ship safety. I can't avoid having a first word of a colleague testimonial for Irene. I learned today about that she's no longer with us. I've met her in Brussels 2.5 years ago, just before the report was coming into reality, and she was an inspiration colleague. So my condolences and my word of testimonial. Finally, a question to the distinguished panelists. I work on the ship safety unit. I can't avoid the ship safety angle, so the question is going on that direction. Alternative fuels and energy conversion technologies are key building blocks in the energy transformation. I have been taking a place in discussions at IMO in the developments of guidelines for the use of alternative fuels, methanol, fuel cells currently in discussion. The development of these guidelines inevitably at international level takes around 6, 7, 8 years from the moment they start being discussed until they finally get some shape. We are looking into a work plan ahead, which is including ammonia, including hydrogen, including a number of technical challenging aspects on board ships, integration as well. My question is, if we want to scale up and we want to do it fast, and we know that regulatory framework, even soft regulations, they play a key role in providing certainty for the longer term. How can, for instance, the waterborne or the experience from ship owners be accelerated also in this process of developing these important instruments? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. It is touching upon the point I'm already made at the earlier intervention that it's crucial we do not end up in a deadlock. We have new equipment that cannot be used in installations. That you have to do formal safety assessments for every installation of the vessel. So what we try to do in the partnership we are developing these new technologies is every project we address also safety and include potential regulation, try to draft regulations fitting the equipment that we are developing. So move that along with the development of technology. Of course, we cannot solve the problem of IMO. So the 8 years during an IMO, we can't help that for you. But what we see is a gradual introduction into the shipping market. Say new technology could, for instance, first be used in inland vessels that can be regulated easily in Europe. Short sea vessels could still be regulated within Europe. Certain ferries are regulated in Europe. So we could draft regulations, work with regulations, show that they work, then move on to IMO for the deep sea shipping. But it is a problem that we need to tackle as early as possible.
Thank you. I understand 2 questions from, that was from the chat.
From the chat to the panel. So if you're ready, here come the first 2. The first one, methanol has been mentioned as a potential alternative choice or a probable alternative choice, the questioner says. Are there other alternatives? And I'll give you the second one now, so you can really think about both questions. Imagine that all the funds necessary are there, with the right technology to be implemented. How fast can the transformation of the sector happen? Can we see real change in 10 years? So over to you.
Well, the first question may be easier than the second question. There are many alternatives. Methanol, it's mentioned often, but of course, methanol, you have different forms, but we mean green methanol, derived from electricity, hydrogen, whatever you want. But you have ammonia derived from hydrogen, or pure hydrogen that you can use, or hydrogen stored in other forms on board. And of course, you have electrification vessels. So certain ferries, for instance, could be 100% electrified. Deep sea vessels could be partially electrified, sailing into ports, etc. So it probably will be a combination of power generation. The second question is a little bit more difficult. If you look at the current fleet and you would have to replace old vessels, new ones with technologies that take at least 30 years, because it's a lifetime of vessels usually sail at sea. So we have to focus also not just on developing new technologies, but also on how to retrofit existing vessels. That's even more complicated than having a new vessel. A new vessel, you have more leeway of playing around with general arrangements. You can move tanks to other sides of the vessel, whatever. That's more difficult in an existing vessel. So we should also, and then we look also into this in partnership, that how to retrofit existing vessels, new technology. Is it possible in 10 years' time? Well, I think we will have solutions. And market introduction, of course, will take time. So many vessels, you can't do them all in 1 year. It's impossible. So it will take 10 to 20 years to do all this rollout. So we will see solutions coming up in a few years, 5 years from now. The solutions will be on the market. 10 years' time, we will. The rollout will take at least 10 more years because of the number of vessels that we have at sea.
And if I can just jump in there, I think that's why I want to reiterate the point I made earlier. We do need to pick our greenhouse gas emissions now. We are, in a climate emergency. So while we are working on this future part of the solution, And it's only part, I really believe, because I do not think it's inevitable that shipping will increase. And we can make that inevitable, and we can address this point, and we should address this point. But that's another discussion. While we are waiting for the future to come, we really need to slow down speed.
And I want to join.
Many ship owners will underline your approach as a transitional measure, I hope. Vasilis?
Well, my decarbonization path is a long one, and responding to Ricardo's observation to speed up guidelines and also on the last two questions, I do believe that on this transformation exercise, we should not leave behind the human element. We should also try to effectively provide the right training and the upgrade of skills of our seafarers in order to respond to any new technological developments. This is of extreme importance, and it addresses also the safety issues, also the green transformation.
Thank you. This is the introduction to the wrap-up. I just wanted to, I'm turning to Henrik, if there is anything you want to comment. Perhaps we can then slowly wrap up. If there is not the appetite, there is one episode.
There.
One, okay.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, all. Weika Balea from Ajax. First of all, I would like to congratulate both agencies for the high quality of the MT report. With the development and use of new fuels and technologies, zero and ultra-low carbon fuels, industry is increasingly demanding practical, real-world acceptable technical standards to address the safety aspects of this new technology that has been mentioned in your panel. I would just like to recall, as some panelists have done, the relevance of class in that process. And just let's remember that before the entry into force of IGF code in 2017, all the LNG propelled vessels has been statutorily certified on the basis of classification society rules issued by Ajax members. And thus, one information in order to address these high relevant issues, the Ajax Council has decided to establish a dedicated Ajax expert group on safety aspects of all the coming innovation. So we are also on board, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you. We are counting.
Okay.
Technical support from Maya.
Yes. Maya, should we wrap up the
I
session?
think so.
I'm not going to do what usually people do, is give you 12 seconds to then say the most important thing is, but if I can frame it in a bit broader context, as a European Environment Agency, we work with climate data and biodiversity data across the sectors. So we do things with aviation, we do things with agriculture, with the energy sector, the built environment. And there is one field that is increasingly crowded. If we go to net zero emissions in 2050, we will have about 10% emissions left. And for 10%, we bank on carbon capture and storage and on the natural system. And that 10% that is left is getting increasingly crowded. Agriculture thinks that they have a disproportional claim on that 10%. Transport is claiming that they should play. Yeah? The built environment, of course, is going to have. We will never. It doesn't add up when you add it all up. Yeah. So the challenge, I think, for across the sectors, is indeed to think out of the box and to find solutions that are not efficiency gains, because they will not get us there. The challenge as a society is to reflect on how our standard of living and our well-being can be realized within the limits that Europe has set in the climate law and in the long-term ambitions. And I think if we have the courage to sit together, work together, listen to each other, and accept the boundary conditions of that debate, that we might have a good chance of taking the lead in Europe in finding credible solutions. And I was very encouraged by the debate today. There is a willingness to listen and a willingness to discuss. I would like to emphasize also that the report is not the result of working in the bubble of the agencies. We had workshops, we listened to the sector, we listened to the environmental movement, we listened to others, and I think it is the only way forward. Because if everybody stays in their cocoon, we're not going to get there. The field is too crowded, it will have to be out of the box, and the only way to get there is by working together. And I feel privileged, Maya, to be in your beautiful house here and to have been a cooperating partner on this.
Thank you, Hans. Indeed, it was very encouraging to hear from all players, and I'm now regretting that we didn't mix you a little bit more. But the discussion was very lively, and it was obvious that we are really all on board and that we are not questioning the objectives, that we are discussing how we can achieve it in the best and fastest possible way and make it and turn it into our competitive, European competitive advantage. You will have, as you have your partner in other European institutions from the Commission, which we have heard in the morning. Of course, you have all support and open doors of the European agencies. This is our first report, but certainly not the last. We already discussed how we can fill the gaps in the information that we have identified and how can we lead us to the second edition, facilitating policy-making processes on one hand side and discussion on both the European and global level, since, as we always underline, we are one player in the larger arena, and we want to keep our leading position in that arena. Thank you once again very much. We are expecting to be joined by the Commissioner in a couple of minutes, which gives us the opportunity to take a very short break, and we will continue. Once again, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I ask you to kindly take your seats after a short break. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as we all take our seats after the short break and after the very interesting panel discussion, of course, all our thanks go to the panelists and to the moderators, of course, to the two executive directors, for that very thought-provoking and very interesting discussion. And now we close this event, this conference, with some reflections from our honored guest, who has just arrived. So I'm going to give a couple of seconds as she makes herself comfortable. But our very honored guest, we're absolutely delighted that she's here with us today in Lisbon, in EMSA's headquarters, to celebrate the launch of the European Maritime Transport Environmental Report. Ladies and gentlemen, may I ask you to welcome the Commissioner for Transport, Ms. Adina Vălean.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the warm welcome. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you, especially with the launch of this report, the environmental report. I know both the directors who worked with their teams in this report, and I really appreciate the high quality of work, and I want to congratulate you from the very beginning, Maya and Hans, for this report today. In an age where we are increasingly flooded with data, it is even more valuable to have all this information clearly pieced together and thoroughly assessed, so that we as policymakers can have the full picture and base our decisions on reliable evidence. So this report provides a truly unique reference guide for anyone working on or simply interested in shipping-related policies at EU level or in the member states. And it's a wonderful example of interagency cooperation. We'll need to see more such examples working across silos and organizational boundaries if we are to meet the many complex challenges ahead of us. So, what lessons have I myself drawn from this report? Firstly, that our past efforts are paying off. For example, today, thanks to stricter European and international rules, oil spills and their horrific consequences for marine life, birds and beaches have become a rarity. The global sulfur emissions cap that we have implemented also means hundreds of thousands of Europeans in coastal areas and millions globally now being able to breathe cleaner air. These successes are clear evidence that shipping can reduce its environmental footprint and expand at the same time. Secondly, that our work is still far from done. As the effect of climate change become more tangible, we need to accelerate our work to decarbonize the maritime sector, while of course making sure we continue to harness its economic benefits. The European Green Deal and our sustainable and smart mobility strategy set the bar. The EU transport sector needs to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by almost 90% by 2050. And the Fit for 55 package that we presented in July provides us with new tools to go there. On the one hand, we have proposed to extend emissions trading to maritime transport. The emission trading scheme has already proven an effective means of cutting emissions in other sectors while giving companies the flexibility to decide how and to what extent they wish to do so. While the ETS will help stimulate energy efficiency, it is unlikely to promote the production and uptake of renewable low carbon that will be indispensable to fully clean up the maritime transport. That is why we have also put forward a Fuel EU maritime proposal, which introduces a gradual obligation on shipping companies to bunker cleaner fuels. With these proposals, we are frontrunners. This is the first legislative initiative of its kind for maritime transport. It will kickstart the uptake of sustainable alternative fuels and zero-emission technologies in this sector, which still relies on fossil fuels for 99% of its energy needs. By setting long-term technology-neutral targets on the greenhouse gas intensity of energy used on ships up until 2050, will provide the sector with the regulatory predictability it needs to unlock investments towards decarbonization. In preparing these initiatives, it was invaluable for us to be able to rely on the data and evidence from the EMTR report, information on traffic volumes, on current and likely evolutions of fuel usage, on the number of ships that are already on shore-powered supply ready, for instance. Thanks to this, we were able to build a proposal that it's, I would say, both ambitious and proportionate, and that I'm sure will be both efficient and cost-effective. Of course, we will count on future editions of the EMTER report to help us to follow up on the impacts of our measures once their implementation begins. I said I am proud of our proposals, and I believe that they can be a springboard for more ambitious actions at the International Maritime Organization, because EU action alone will not suffice to transform the global sector. We all need to work together, and I will certainly continue to push for this. Change is always challenging, but new demands also present an opportunity. The EU's maritime cluster is highly innovative. By being and remaining at the forefront of the green transition, we can ensure that our maritime industry will pioneer and mainstream new technologies and maintain its strategic edge. The report provides us with valuable insights into what is needed to grow shipping while protecting the environment. Together, let's use this knowledge. Let's make the most of the latest technological and digital advances to set the standards for innovative, efficient, and sustainable shipping. This is the recipe to combat climate change and reduce pollution while making operations safer and more efficient, creating attractive jobs and ensuring maritime transport remains a cornerstone of our trade-based European economy. I look forward to continue working with all of you towards this goal so that we can continue to have the best possible policies based on the latest and most comprehensive evidence. Thank you all again, and I wish you a successful activity in this field. Thank you.
Commissioner, thank you very much. Madam Commissioner, distinguished guests, we close our conference here. It has been a deeply interesting debate. So many different points of view represented. And whether virtually or whether you've been here, we thank you for joining us here in EMSA today in our Lisbon headquarters. Until the next time, thank you and goodbye.